A lot of people know what they should eat. A lot of people know they should work out. A lot of people know they should do this and that and make their calls and do whatever they got to do to grow their business, but they don't do it. And it's not because they don't want to or their why isn't big enough. Maybe their why isn't big enough, but make your money work for you. I could go spend $10,000 on a vacation, or I could spend $10,000 or $20,000 on either investing in myself or investing in my company or investing. Like, fear is that ceiling, right? People don't take action because they're afraid. People who are on the most dangerous place are the people taking action.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself a favor and subscribe and follow the podcast. We've been bringing on amazing guests all year this year, and you definitely don't want to be the person that has FOMO because you missed out. Without further ado, let's get right into this interview. Kyle, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to know you, get to meet you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your elevator pitch? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Kyle Kunkel. I live in Southwest Colorado. Love my family, love God, and love changing people's lives, and love changing, the way you think. And that's the number one thing in my mind. So, but yeah, I mean, we help people all around the world. So, but yeah, I believe if you can transform the way you think, you can transform your life.
100%, man. I love how you kept it nice and simple and jam-packed. And let's dive deeper into who was Kyle. Like, what was wealth like in your household? What was it like growing up in these topics? Was it something that you were kind of swept under the rug, or is it something that was openly talked about?
Yeah, no, great question. So as far as for me and my family growing up, came from very humble beginnings. Not as humble as a lot of the world. I've been to 30 plus countries, so I've seen what real poverty looks like. So, but as far as in America, like, just financial literacy wasn't a thing, necessarily in our household, and wasn't taught, how to save. Definitely wasn't taught how to invest. Thought of money and thought of like people with money as bad, So it was just something that I really learned through life and seeking out other people. And but yeah, as far as growing up, I mean, it was paycheck to paycheck. Couldn't buy certain things as a kid. Limited in a lot of ways, but I know for one thing, like, I learned how to work hard from my dad. That's one thing I'll never forget how to do, and that's a lot of the reason for my success is for him never giving up. So, but as far as, we never lived in the big fancy house, never went to the private schools, never had the nice cars, never had limited vacations, that kind of thing. But it's still amazing life, right? Like, you don't need money to be happy and have success, and it looks different to everybody. But for me, it was, I think, just the education on what money is a game changer. But yeah, so we lived in a tent for a little bit as a family, not super long, but I mean, that's just where it was. We were always renting, always moving, and that was kind of our situation.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned a little point here that you kind of just slipped by, but I hope a lot of people caught. You mentioned that you know what real poverty is. And I think this is a great part to start the conversation. I know this is where it wasn't planned, but I'm really curious on this topic because I talk about it all the time. And people here in the U.S., they have first world problems. And a lot of people complain about things that in the grand scheme of things aren't really all that impactful, all that meaningful, or all that serious, right? Nobody's dying, nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's in war, nobody's in famine, nobody's starving, right? So it's like, let me ask you, because I've traveled to one country outside of the U.S. I went to Dominican Republic back in 2019. And when I was there, they were still using, because I went to El Campo, so right, it was not the fancy 5-star, 4-star resort. I was really in like the boonies and where my grandparents grew up. And from there, they still had to use the bucket of water to scoop and flush out the toilet because they didn't have actual plumbing where they could just click the button or the lever down and flush. And so that for me was super humbling because I spent like close to a month over there. So now you've experienced this almost like 30 times now. You've been to 30 countries. So define for us, for anyone that doesn't have that perspective, hasn't had the opportunity to broaden their horizon, what does real poverty look like?
Yeah, no, great question. And yeah, so true. And I love your experience in Dominican, but yeah, so after playing college baseball, my first mission trip actually was to the Dominican. And that was kind of like what kind of got my bug for traveling. And then right after I graduated, I went to 11 countries, 11 months. And the first place we went to was Guatemala. And we worked, every country has different levels of poverty, just like the US, right? But when we went here, it's like we worked with like a community of people that actually lived and worked at the dump, and it was just thinking about it is just crazy. Like we drive in there and just the smell, right? And people just live in this, and kids are running around having the best time of their lives, man. They're like finding little treasures in the trash, man. Like this little dinosaur. I remember this kid picks up this little toy dinosaur. It's like not big, like this big. And he just lit up and was so pumped about it. And, they're making pennies, a day kind of a thing. And their houses are made out of trash, like and bathrooms, plumbing, electricity, that doesn't exist. So that was like kind of a gut punch in a lot of ways, just to be like, man, first world problems. Like, I mean, like we are so blessed just to speak the English language, right? Because everybody in the world is trying to learn. If they're trying to learn a language, they're trying to learn English, right? Just for the opportunity. And so to be born in this place in America, it really is opportunity. Like, so anyways, very, very, but yeah, that was just a piece of it. And I mean, poverty looked like different every place we went, because we worked with different people in every country and did everything from working with orphans to fighting human trafficking to building houses. So it was just a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, man. And I love that you just gave us some perspective, because it's something that not a lot of people get the opportunity to experience going on these mission trips. And these other people that are on the receiving end, so many of them never get help. And you were saying that a lot of these people if they want to learn a language, it's always going to be English, right? And although English isn't the most spoken, I think it's the second most common language in the world, because there's so much opportunity that comes from this country, from this U.S., and everyone is so busy looking at the negatives because they're born here. And so when everything is going great, the only thing you do have to do is to find, points that are maybe not the best or whatever. But compared to virtually everywhere else, it's something that we have to take a lot more appreciation and gratitude for what we have here. Even just this conversation now, right? Being able to do that, being absolutely miles away in different time zones, like wouldn't have ever been possible. And people in these other countries don't even know stuff like this exists.
I know. Yeah.
Let's segue into today's conversation. If you growing up knew poverty for what you experienced to be, I know it changed later on as you started to see more countries, but growing up in pretty humble beginnings, what was that like, breaking free from a lot of the things that you might have learned and picked up growing up?
Yeah. I mean, I think even just spending habits, like with my wife, Megan, like she grew up, like her family, they like ran a restaurant together. And so she kind of came from like a business background. And, as far as like, don't spend more than you have, like a simple thing like that. And for me, I was like, oh, I got money, now I'm going to spend it. Right. and so it's like, or the idea of just because I can buy it doesn't mean I have to buy it. Right. And just like little stuff like that, when you're not taught like, hey, don't spend the money before you have it. Just like little stuff that, I never really thought that I didn't really know that would affect not even just relationship with my wife, but also just everything. So, but as far as what it started to become, like once I understood like how money worked and just the law of attraction and just all this stuff and just like breaking barriers in my mind of like, I was reading a book and they were saying like, there's enough money for every single person in America to be a millionaire, like every single person. So it's like, dang, that's crazy to even think about, that people are so, like they're just kind of like their mind doesn't allow them to think that, right? They don't even know how to comprehend what that would look like to make that kind of money. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as it was freeing in a lot of ways, we're realizing that money's not a bad thing. It's just a tool, right? And it's just a tool that we get to use, and some people use it for good and some people use it for bad. And so that's more of what I've kind of learned as kind of breaking through it. If that answered your question, I'm not sure.
No, definitely, man. It definitely, and it segues into the next question I wanted to ask you too as well. It's because you mentioned too while you were just speaking that even just knowing that just because I have it doesn't mean I need to spend it. Like little things like that is so hard to come by when you're not used to not having much, because you feel almost in a way, well, not everybody, but in some cases, you feel almost in a way entitled because you work so hard to get there. You finally earned it. So it's like, I deserve this. I deserve to spend it on this new car or this whatever it may be. And that's the thing that usually keeps a lot of people trapped in that rat race and keeps the cycle continuing.
Yeah, that's right.
Forevermore. So let me ask you,
That's
how
right.
do you kind of build that self-discipline to really just get over that, and not only get over it, but stay over it and not, I mean, of course you may have relapses every now and then. For the most part though, like just stay over it so that you don't have to worry about constantly like, hey, am I going to fall back into my old spending habits? Like, how do you build that discipline up to start overcoming a lot of these bad habits that were built growing up?
Yeah, I think one of the things is just accountability, right? Like, I think a lot of people know what they should eat. A lot of people know they should work out. A lot of people know they should do this and that and make their calls and, you do whatever they got to do to grow their business, but they don't do it, right? And it's not because they don't want to or their why isn't big enough. Maybe their why isn't big enough, but in a lot of ways, it's just accountability. And I think accountability is key for everything. And so, me and my wife sit down and look at our budget. Don't have the poverty mindset of thinking like, oh, we could never do this or can't go on this trip. It's like, no, we're just going to make X amount, or we're going to invest in this and allow that investment to pay for it. So just looking at things differently, meaning like, and understanding like tax incentives has been huge. Like, hey, I'm not going to go buy my car. I'm going to lease my car. Instead of getting a percentage of the write-off, I'm going to get 100% of the write-off, right? So it's just like little things like that, because you got to figure out what's a liability and what's an asset, right? Liability is your car. Liability is actually your house, unless you got somebody living in a room paying you rent. Like, I mean, it may appreciate over time, but you can't, that's not cash flow. So just understanding like little things like that, understanding like how to make your money work for you, right? I could go spend $10,000 on a vacation, or I could spend $10,000 or $20,000 on either investing in myself or investing in my company or investing in some type of asset that's going to pay me, right? And then when it pays me, then I go take that vacation with what it pays me, right? So learning how to buy things with, residual income versus just whatever because once you spend it on something like that, it's gone, right? You don't get to take it back. But if you put it into something that's going to pay you, then it pays you every single month. And then it's like, all right, now I'm going to take this. Now I'm going to go on vacation. Now I'm going to go buy that car. Now I'm going to go, it's just different, right? And so a lot of people, like, they spend it and then it's gone. And they may have a car, or they may have a house, or they may have something nice, but it's a liability. It's not paying them. So why don't you put it into something that's actually going to pay you? So I think just as far as the discipline on going back, it's just like, man, it's so much more freeing to think like this. So I'm not going to go back to thinking, I'm just not, right? Like, I'm not going to live in a season of lack or man, like, oh, I know a lot of real estate agents like, oh, the market's changed and, they're living in this fear, but I'm seeing it's like, man, this is a land of opportunity, right? Like, this is the time to take market share. This is the time to blow your business up. This is the time to double down, right? When people pull back, like, that's when I'm charging forward. So I think, it's just, yeah. So it starts with like routine and changing the way you think and mindset and all that stuff, and being disciplined every single day. But yeah, that's some of it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing advice. And you mentioned too, that investing in yourself. I got this idea from Hermosi, and he talks about how in your 20s, it's the time of your life where you just need to grow your skills and better yourself. That is where you focus on getting better at income-producing activities, income-producing.
That's right.
So you could be paid. And a lot of people, and this is why I hate traditional advice, because this entrepreneur road that me and you are on, and a lot of the people that are listening are on, you can't follow traditional advice. As an entrepreneur, you're already part of a small group where no one's probably going to understand you. And then you're a successful entrepreneur, and you're even part of a smaller group. And for some perspective, right, only they say what, like 1% to 2% of the population becomes an entrepreneur or something like that. So over in the US, I don't know how much that is. And then only about 1 out of every 10 businesses actually succeed within 5 years. So it's like, if you're a successful business owner, it doesn't mean you're making like millions of dollars. But if you're just making six figures, like just 100,000 as a business owner, right, then you're even a even smaller part of the population. So the group of people that actually understand you and understand where you're coming from is so small. So a lot of these people preach this advice of, at 20 years old, if you invest in the S&P 500, $200, by the time you're 75, you have $10 trillion. And it's like, that is a traditional piece of advice for traditional path following people. Not to say that it's a bad thing, but for people, as I said, that are on this.
I'll say, I think it's a bad thing. I think it's
personally. I think it's a bad thing for me personally, and I think it's a bad thing for anyone that's probably listening to this, because if you're listening to this, you probably are an entrepreneur. It's like,
Yeah.
but that thing is so, hey, I'm going to just sell my life away in hopes that I make it to 75. And it's like, if you invest $200 in something else, you're just making the rich man richer, right? You're just filling up the pockets of all these big, Fortune 500 companies. So it's like, put that money into you. And that's something that I had to take that on advice, because I was on the fence on a lot of things. And I went to a couple conferences last year, but there were some things that I knew would have benefited me, and I was on the fence on last year a ton. And like this year, like in my walk in January and my walk in February episodes, like I was sharing that now I done spent a little bit of money so far this year on some, or for me, it's not a little bit, it's actually a lot of bit, enough money to make me feel like I was nervous. I opened the card. I paid like almost $8,800 from the accelerator program. And I was like, literally like stomach, like butterflies. And it was like, no, this is going to take me to that next level. And I had to think about it. Like, people that are playing at that next level aren't making decisions worrying about a couple thousand bucks here and there. And not to say don't worry, forget about your budget, but I'm just saying, if you got it and you want to grow, invest in yourself. Don't sit on the fence. And that's something that I had to learn a lot too. But I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier too, investing in yourself. What did that look like for you? What did your journey of investing in yourself look like? And walk us through that.
Yeah. So I started from the very beginning of just getting into sales, right? So I worked for, and I'm going to I worked for UPS when I first moved to this small little mountain town in Colorado, and I hated it. And I was working 9 to 5, and I was like, this is miserable. And I came home and told my wife after, we had been married for like 2 months, and I was like, hey, I quit my job. She's like, you what? She's like, you quit your job? And I was like, yeah, I quit. And she's like, what are we going to do? I was like, I don't know. She was starting to go to nursing school and was working at the family restaurant. And I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start this, this magazine and selling ads and have a franchise. And she's like, what? And so anyways, I go like 0 for 55 in sales. And then finally I had some sale, like 0 for 55. Like that is a bad average. Like, I'm a baseball player, and that's bad. That is like bad. So I realized, like, man, I got to learn from the people who have gone before me. And so I had a mentor a long time ago say, hey, go find somebody with fruit on the tree and learn from them, and let their ceiling be your floor. And so that's what I've done in every aspect of my life. So I remembered that, and I started doing that. So I went out and learned from somebody, started making sales. And then same thing when I got into real estate. When I went to go pass my real estate test, I failed the test at least 12 times. And my wife's like, are you sure you want to keep doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I ended up buying this course, cost $100. And to me at that time, I was like, well, you know what? Like, I was hesitant on spending money on something like that. And it wasn't a lot of money. It's like $100. But then it was like, it's almost like I had to break through these certain levels of learning how to spend money on myself to better myself. And that for me, it was $100. It made me study in a different way, pass that test. And then first year in real estate, I made $222,000. And every single year I made $100,000 more. And it's because I was willing to invest in myself. And then I'm like breaking new levels. It's like, man, I'm going to spend $2,000 a month on this thing. Man, I'm going to this mastermind, spending $25,000 on this. I'm spending, and it's just like, and it's crazy to think about that type of money that's leaving. But what it does is it makes you solve problems, right? Yeah. So it's like, man, I got this expense of $2,000 a month. How am I going to solve it, right? And so now I figured out how to have other people cover my ad spend, right? So it's just like I'm solving problems. Like when you take massive action, it makes you solve these bigger problems, and so you have bigger problems, so you have to solve them. But if you always stay down here in this comfort zone of like, oh, I'll spend this, or I'll spend $100 here, but not anymore, or that's a way above my budget, it just kind of puts a cap on solving these certain problems. Like you're not going to have big problems to solve because you're not taking big action, right? Massive action. So, but when you take these massive action, it's like, man, I got to solve this crazy problem that I never really knew how to do. And now I'm solving them. So it's a different way of thinking. And that's kind of been the journey over the last 3 or 4 years is pulling out that checkbook and saying, hey, I want to learn from this person. Boom, there it is. I'm paying the money to learn. And I've been blessed a lot of the ways to have mentors along the way that have been just coaches and that have just been there for nothing, right? Other than just a friendship. But at the same time, like a lot of times you got to be willing to get on a plane. A lot of times you got to be willing to write the check. and it'll take you to that next level.
No, I love that you mentioned it, bro. There's so much resonance between your stories and mine. Like for me, my first thing that I took was a wholesaling course. I ended up taking my wholesaling course after that because someone told me, an attorney told me that it wasn't allowed in Connecticut, although it is. And so I was like, at that point in time, that was the professional. So I was like, screw it. I guess I can't do this or whatever. It wasn't until later I found out I could. But I ended up then signing up for my real estate course. And then that's when I decided to drop out of college. And it's like cold turkey. It's the middle of the pandemic. And I was just like, yep, man, I'm doing this. I'm figuring it out. And it's funny now because there's back to that old saying of, God, we make plans, God laughs. Because like right now, how I played this out last year is right now, I would probably be the best selling agent in my office, rookie of the year, selling all these houses. And like now I'm not even focused on real estate at all. I just soft launched my course on like real estate marketing for realtors. And then I have this podcast that's now jumping off. I got the president of my company coming on the podcast in May. So this is going to be dropping.
Let's go.
On. So it's like, I got David Meltzer also is coming on the podcast. So it's a big time.
Nice. Yeah.
Like, it's crazy how when you focus on one thing and you put in the work and you start playing, as you said, at these higher levels. There's a saying one of my friends and coaches from speaker school said that he who cashes the biggest check solves the biggest problems, or he who solves the biggest problems cashes the biggest check. And it's like as your mind starts to expand, and it feels so uncomfortable because then you have to admit that you were thinking small this whole time. You have to admit that you were pretty much setting your own ceiling. And I strongly believe all the ceilings that we have placed over our head were all built by us, right? We are the only ones with those ceilings. And society may tell us to build it, but we are the ones who end up at the end of the day building these, ceilings brick by brick, and then you have to tear them down. So let me ask you, at every stage of life, there's a new ceiling that you'll have to break through. Eventually, you get really good at breaking ceilings. So for anyone that's still in there, like smaller, like at the lower levels, and they're still trying to break into their, first couple ceilings, what have you learned over the course of your experience of breaking ceilings? Like, how does one break their personal ceilings and just thrive through it?
Yeah. I believe that, with fear, like fear is that ceiling, right? People don't take action because they're afraid, right? They're afraid of letting people down. They're afraid of failure. They're afraid of all these things. And I've learned, even with that massive action piece, like the people who are on the most dangerous place are the people taking action, some action, because they're like, oh, I'm doing better than this person. I'm doing better than this person. Look, I've done this. Look, I've done this. But you're not living in the full potential of what you were created to be, right? Like when you take massive action, it's like you're failing. You're having to solve bigger problems. And so I believe the opportunity and what you're destined to do is on the other side of that fear, right? Is on the other side of that ceiling. And so when you learn how to break through it, it's like, man, I've done this before. Like I know how to do this. I know how to break through it. I just need to go for it. And that's, people have amazing ideas, right? People were designed to have, a lot of people were designed to do something. Then, this is for somebody I feel like that's listening right now, that there is some of you who are listening who are living a life that you weren't designed to live, right? You're trapped in a job, you're trapped in the 9 to 5, and you're afraid because you're not sure of the outcome. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of, letting someone down. And to be honest, it's like, you don't want to go to your grave and have those dreams die with you, because there's certain dreams and certain things that were put inside of every single person that nobody else has, right? And so for you not to pursue that, right, and even fail into it, but when you're failing, you're learning, right? You're missing out on what you're created to be. And so, but that ceiling is something that, so the more you break through it, you're like, oh, I've done this before. This is easy. Boom. And it's just going to that next level. And I believe the quicker you fail, the quicker you learn, and then you can accelerate from there. So
yeah, it's all about reshifting that paradigm around what failure actually is. And it's just an opportunity to grow.
That's right.
And so once you get used to that, it makes the feeling of failure it's fun. Because it's like, all right, I'm on the right track. I'm trying something new. I'm trying something different. Let's get after it. Like for me, and I always say that God loves good stewards, and that's of everything, and especially good stewards of ideas, because all these ideas that are being placed within us, I feel they aren't ours, right? They're ideas that God has blessed us and put it within us, and if you don't act on them, don't get mad when a friend or someone on TV starts up a business, it's like, I literally thought of that 7 months ago. But it's like, yeah, and you didn't do anything 7 months ago. So boom, that idea that you were originally blessed with now gets sent out to somebody else who's going to carry out the mission of carrying on that idea. And a lot of people be like, if it's meant to be, it'll be me, or if it's meant to be. And I feel like, yeah, no, because a lot of people use that as an excuse to hold them back.
It's an excuse.
Yeah, and it's like, no, if it's to be, it will be you. You have to make it you, because time and life doesn't stop for anybody, man. And you know that, right? And it's like, for me, it's been hard realizing that, hey, I need to get after it, and I need to get after it now, because, I don't want to wake up one day and it's like, man, I just wasted so much time, because time spent is time that you can't get back. And that is the only time I feel that you can probably lose or fail, is when you lose time and don't get anything in return. And so if you're in a job that you hate and something like that, as you said, man, you might be trapped, and now it's up to you to figure out a solution, and our brains are built to find solutions. So let me ask you, right? So now you're on this journey, you were in real estate, you had tons of success. When did you realize that you wanted to do something much bigger? Did you always have it in mind? Because I know after college, after baseball, you said that you wanted to you got into the missions and doing that. When became like your main focus though?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I went into doing missions, and then I ended up meeting my wife, and ended up, getting married and all that stuff. And ended up in the small little town, ended up in the business and sales and marketing and all that kind of stuff, and running my business. And I was like, this is fun. I realized the impact that I could have on business owners, right? And then it kind of gave me this bug of like, wow, like, imagine like impacting business owners to like be able to impact this world, right? Because they have employees, right? They're the ones, spending the money and putting money in the nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, imagine like changing someone's heart that's in business. That's what I want to do. And so, but it wasn't really, honestly, it was about a year and a half ago when I really started this journey of like starting like my Bear Fruit show and like all this stuff. But I was working with a client, and I shared this story, I think, a little bit with you, but it was in West Palm, and it was a client, looking to spend, a good amount of money in Southwest Colorado. We're looking all over the state, really, like Aspen, Vail, Telluride, Durango, all these places. And the guy was looking to spend $40 million, and I happened to be in West Palm. And so we ended up connecting, and we went to this hotel that was super swanky, and it was called the Breakers, and it's a beautiful place. And so I go in, and this guy walks in, and he looked nothing like I thought he was going to look like. And because you never know over the phone, right? It's not like we did a Zoom. And so he comes in, and we just connected, man. And a lot of my connections has been because of travel. Like he's not, he's first generation American, but his family is from a different country. And so that we connected about that, and we just started connecting, and he shared with me like, man, and he had recently just shared with me that he had gone through a divorce and has now a 5-year-old daughter, but a young daughter, and all this stuff. And I was on some business stuff. Actually, I was actually at a Grant Cardone conference, the 10X last year. And we were spending some extra time in West Palm with a buddy. And so I brought my family, right? So we were on vacation, doing work and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, man, like I can have anything I want in this world, like anything. Like he was showing, he's showing me stuff, and he was just like, I can have anything. He's like, but I don't have what you have. And I was like, dang. And this kind of hit me like, man, this guy looking to spend $40 million on a second, probably like a 100th house, right? Kind of a thing. And he, and he's saying he doesn't have what I have. And I was like, wow, what I have is something that I need to share, right? Because there's people out there chasing the money and chasing the thing for the wrong reason. And I feel like, there's more, right? More than just, I believe everybody has different buckets in life, right? They have their spiritual bucket, mental bucket, physical bucket, and financial bucket. And each one of these buckets need to be full, and not just full, but overflowing, right? So you can have impact on other people. And so there's some people who may have that financial bucket full, but their relationship bucket is half full, right? Or it's empty, or, their physical bucket is not where it should be. And so they end up having these massive kind of failures in life because they're not constantly taking little actions that fill these buckets up. And so that's when I was like, man, I need to start changing lives in a different way. I need to start using my voice. I need to start using, getting on stages and sharing my story, because that's the type of impact that I want to have. Selling real estate and investing in real estate is fun, but it's not necessarily my calling.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, man. And that's super touching to have someone of that stature, of that level of success in life to say something like that. I can only imagine how that feels. And I want to ask you, what does finding that bug, like, how, explain that feeling? I haven't really been able to put it to words, but like when you get that bug, it's something that never died. You can't turn it off. You can't I don't want to change the world today. Let's not think about it. And it's something that's kind of like ever going, that you always kind of have in you, I feel. What is getting that entrepreneur, that bug, or like that bug of changing the world, or fulfilling your purpose? How does that bug feel like?
Yeah. What does it feel like? I mean, it feels freeing, right? It feels like it's just freeing, and it feels like something like, man, like you always hear people say like, oh, you could, if you find something you love, you never do it, you never work a day in your life. And it's just something, it's like, man, I just truly enjoy this, and it fills your cup, and you may get tired from it, but you're not getting worn out from it, right? People are going to work and they're getting beat up and they're getting worn out, and their marriages are suffering, and their kids don't know who they are. And, they may live in, the white picket fence and have the nice car, but they're miserable on the inside. And it's because they're not living out what's inside of them. And so when you do that, you truly find joy. I believe like there's a difference between happiness and joy, and you find like true fulfillment and true joy. And I believe, like Zig Ziglar said, when you can help everybody else solve their problems, that's when, you're going to have success. Like when you can help as many people solve all their problems. And so, I believe when you start solving people problems, that's when you're going to start to find like your calling, right? And everybody's different, right? People have different problems in whatever area of life, but everybody has something else to give too, right? Everybody else has another way to impact. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't have everything figured out. It's like, you got to be, half a step ahead of somebody else to help them, right?
Yeah.
Or just even say, hey man, like, I love you, man. Or just put your arm around them, or say, I'm here for you. Like all that kind of stuff, like goes a long way. But yeah, so, I mean, it feels freeing. That's the bottom line. Like transformation. That's what it is.
Yeah. And it's something that it's probably the best thing that has happened to me is getting that bug. Cause ever since then, my whole life trajectory just changed.
Yeah.
And I was on a good track already. I was doing very well in school. It just happened to be the middle pandemic. I was taking online classes, but then once I found that bug, it was like, there's so much more out there for me. And once I figured that out, I was like, I got to go get it. I got to. And it's so much more fun. And last year I was getting burnt out because I was so distracted trying to do everything under the sun at the same time. And then once I realized that like what we're doing now, this podcasting like thing is truly what I enjoy. I love gaining new perspective. I love having, making new connections, and through these connections, these conversations, impacting people, like that gets me going, man. I could just flip a switch and then I get into conversation, and this is like a whole nother wave of energy kind of kicks in, and then I'm coming from another place. And you said joy too, and I feel like a lot of people chase this happiness and want happiness to be the end goal, when in fact happiness is just a byproduct of what we're doing. And that joy is something that I feel is holds so much more weight through everything, through the tough times, through the easy times, or whatever times. It's like happiness comes and goes, but like having that true joy in life is something that's really hard to come by. And when you come by, it's like it's a different feeling. And I've been able to come by it, and I've been very fortunate to come by it. I wanted to kind of ask you because you ended up taking a road that you probably didn't foresee. What would little Kyle have thought about all this? If you had to go, talk to yourself and you couldn't address that you were Kyle, would little you know that this is how you turned out without you saying that, hey, I'm you from the future. Hey, I'm Kyle when you grew up. Like, is this something that you had planned?
No, definitely not. I mean, as a little kid, I was like, man, I'm going to play professional baseball. I'm going to, just like every kid, right? And I'm going to go pro. I'm going to be, and I think, I also think a lot of people get hurt in pursuing their dreams because maybe they don't actually get to where they want. But, I think that it's just a stepping stone into what you were really called to, right? Like sports has been a huge part of my life. And now I do something at the high school here called Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And being able to impact those kids, like that fills me up. I love that. And so, so little me, definitely wouldn't have saw me as a business owner, that's for sure. Or an entrepreneur. Like that's definitely just, that was never in my thoughts.
Yeah. Kyle, you have such an amazing story, man. Where can we find you at? Where can we connect with you at if we wanted to get to know more about what you got going on and your mission of changing 1 billion lives?
Yeah. So, bearfruitlife.com, bear like the raw bear, like, right. And, so bear, fruitlife.com. That's where you can find me. And, I know there are a lot of real estate agents on here, or listen to your podcast, but, if financial is something, and it's more than that, we help people like with all aspects. But, if you're looking to have a boost in your business this year, I'm doing a free webinar, make 90K in 90 days.com. So you can register for that. We do it I'm doing it after this actually, right? Doing it at 12 o'clock my time. So, doing that so bearfruitlife.com and make 90K in 90 days.com.
Alrighty. Now it's time for our famous 5 questions we ask every guest that hops on the show. Question number 1, I'm excited to hear and curious to hear what your answer is. What is your most impactful lesson that you've learned in life?
The most impactful lesson. When you say that, the first thing that comes, and sorry for the deep thought there.
No worries.
Yeah. I think the thing that instantly comes to mind was when I was a kid. I wasn't on this trajectory of being a business owner. I was doing drugs and alcohol and all that. And one night at a party, I ended up falling in a ditch and cracking my head. And my parents picked me up and went to the hospital. And since I hit my head on this side, this eye was really dilated. It was really big. It wasn't gonna be normal for another, 2 to 3 weeks. And I was broken. I was devastated. Like doctor said, I would never be able to play sports again. And sports was my life. Football and baseball was my life. And during that time, I just prayed out to God and just said, God, like, give me another chance. I can't promise I'll never, drink again or smoke again, but I can promise I'll never do drugs. Right. And I was just real. And I said, I'm going to change my life. And my dad gave me this verse, Jeremiah 29:11-13. It's for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. Then you'll call upon me and I'll listen to you when you seek me with all your heart. And so I knew that I needed to give God, all my heart, not just a piece of it. And so that's what I did. And it changed my life forever. And I ended up going back to the doctor a couple of days later to get the staples out. And I had him check my eyes and he said, like, your eyes are normal. He said, it's like a miracle. And I ended up moving states and got a new start and changed my life and got to change a lot of people's lives along the way. So I will say the one lesson that I've learned is to surrender to God, and that it'll change your life. So that's probably the biggest lesson. Sorry to get so deep, but that was the one that came to my mind.
Yeah. Question number 2, what is the most admirable trait a person can have?
I think kindness. I think a lot of people get rough around the edges, especially in the business world. You're negotiating, you're dealing with sharks, right? You're dealing with people who, money is the only object. And I think that when you can truly care about somebody, and it's not about the transaction, but it's not transactional, but it's relational. And you truly just the kindness that you can have towards somebody, I think can change your life. So I think kindness is a attribute that is a lot of times lost.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
One book other than the Bible, the Bible, I would say, there's so many great books out there. I'm reading a book right now called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's an old school book, but it is hard to read. I'm on Audible, so like I'm listening to it. So I can read it. I'm telling you.
Right, I've read the paper book, man. It was so annoying reading the book. It was a great book.
Me and thou and like, I was like, dang, I couldn't do that. Anyways, the Audible is a little easier, but it's like all these gurus like Grant Cardone and, Robert Kiyosaki, all those guys' concepts come from, and so I like that. And I think if you can break down those concepts and truly grasp them, and it could be a game changer as far as like the financial aspect of life.
Yeah, maybe. What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
It's a great question. For legacy that I'm trying to leave behind, I'm just trying to impact as many people as I can, because I feel like if I can start to change, if I could, so I mean, if I could change 1 billion people's lives, I think it's going to impact their families, right? Because if you can change a husband or change a wife or change a business owner's life, like the impact they're going to have on his kids and all that. So I guess when people, when one day when they, when I'm in the ground or whatever, and Kyle's gone, I guess I would want people to be like, man, that Kyle guy, he changed the way I thought. He changed the way I thought about life.
And for anyone that wanted to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step that you recommend they take?
Take a step. Get out of your comfort zone. Get out of the boat. Take a step. Take a massive step, right? Don't just you could tiptoe and see if the water feels good, but just jump in and it'll feel good, I promise. And it may be hard and you may not know how to swim, but I promise you'll figure it out. You're not going to drown. You're going to figure it out. And there's going to be people along the way that throw you the life vest, that, teach you how to swim, that teach you how to go to the deep end. And there's going to be people that just show up when you decide to step out. There's some people that show up that you're gonna be like, man, this is my angel. This is the person. I'm not having to pay 25 grand to learn from this person. Like I can just learn from them for free. That person will show up when you decide to step out.
Amazing, man. Kyle, it was a pleasure and an honor getting to interview you. You got real deep, and I love your responses, man. I love when people actually give some meat on the bones and don't give any surface level answers. So I appreciate you hopping on, man. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad we were able to schedule this and get this going, and they just have you on the show.
Absolutely, John. This was a lot of fun. I was really looking forward to this one, and love your show, man. And excited to keep following you, man. And see how high you go, man. It's gonna be fun.